Okay, so thanks everybody that could join today for another one of these brief Teams talks. Today I'm going to talk about how to identify predatory journals or publishers' journals, or what might be considered vanity press. I know this has come up before in research committee where people have wanted to make a submission of a manuscript somewhere to a journal that we weren't totally familiar with, and we're kind of not sure if it was considered a predatory journal or a vanity press. And there are some tools available that kind of help making that determination before you start sending out manuscripts that you want to publish. I've talked about Beall's list before, I think on its own. Jeffrey Beall was a librarian that realized the need for this and built this site to determine predatory or vanity press journals. But he hasn't updated it since he hasn't administered it since maybe 2015 or 2017 was the last time the original list was updated. Since then, another librarian has actually taken up the administration of this site and updates it. The last time it was updated, I think, might be 2021. But there's no changes made to the original list. They've just added, as new journals have popped up that might be problematic, they've been added to this list. And so Beall's, and I can send these links to everybody, but you can see this is just beallslist.net. And there's tabs up here for publishers that are predatory or standalone journals, or what we might consider vanity press, where you just pay and they'll publish anything. I'm not sure if this contact is still working, the person administering it now. But you can see here, there's a list of, if you see these publishers, academia publishing, academia research, without knowing offhand whether or not they were predatory, this list has been indexed here. There's a ton, they're alphabetically listed. And so I mentioned that this hasn't been updated since 2015 or 2017, I can't remember. You can go to so this hasn't changed, the original list, but you can go to the update, and these are publishers that have since the Beall's list was created, have been determined to be predatory publishers, which is not, a publisher that you might not want to deal with. And they're all just alphabetical. I know it's kind of unfortunate that they're just listed alphabetical, but it should be easy to find if you're looking for the title of something you've come across. And then there's this tab for standalone journals. And again, the original list has not been changed, but some of these, without knowing, like academic research reviews, like it sounds, I don't know, if it looks like, especially if they have some kind of metric they've used, which we'll talk about also. There's other ways to look at that. You can actually search here for a standalone journal or a URL to see if it's included in the original list, or you can again go to the update, and these are standalone journals that have been since added that were predatory journals. And again, the last time I think this was updated was 2021. So it's not like totally up to date, but within a couple years. So I've shown Beall's before. Again, vanity press is probably something we want to stay away from. And it kind of gives you an idea. Most people probably know this, but the difference between a predatory journal and a vanity press. Vanity press, people publish things, they just pay money, their manuscript will be published. It doesn't have to be peer reviewed or anything like that. It's got a small list of vanity presses. And actually, you can see this was updated on December 8th, 2021. So that's Beall's list, and I've talked a little bit about that before. Something else I wanted to kind of talk about today, which is another tool for determining this. It's called Think, Check, Submit, and this is more up to date. This is, as far as I know, this is up to date currently. And here you can actually look for books and chapters. If you may be asked to write a chapter for a book, you can search for books and chapters that might be predatory. A lot of how they do this on this site is it's like a checklist, and you can download this, you can use it on the site, and it asks you a series of questions to determine, does this seem legit, or does this seem like maybe it's problematic? And it's basically, it's kind of the more of these boxes you can check when going through this, the more likely that it is a legitimate publisher of books, that it's a legitimate book that they're asking you to write a chapter for. And there's links in here about copyright, and there's guidelines for the Committee on Publication Ethics, which also talks about peer review. They're the ones that determine standards for peer review, so you can actually you just check this, do they follow the guidelines from the Committee on Publication Ethics. So that's just kind of like a tool that you can use to check off to see if something is legitimate or not. You can also download it and just use it offline. But then you can go to journals, And again, we have an explanation of what predatory publishing is, but I kind of think we already know what it is. But again, it's just a checkbox that you go through, and the more of these you can check, if you can have most of them checked, yes, it's probably legitimate. Something that's kind of cool about the journals search here is they've got this ISSN portal. So if you're looking at a journal and they are considering submitting a manuscript, and you're not sure, even with doing this checklist, if you click on this ISSN portal, which every journal publication has an ISSN, just like books have ISBN, you can actually search that journal title or that ISSN, or, and what's kind of cool about this is you can see different countries you can click on to see where you want to search. So if a journal I know is published in the United States, I've got 276,206 records of legitimate journals, but you can actually search. I should have I don't have an example of a predatory journal, but this is a pretty simple way that you can actually find whether or not something might be legitimate or not. They also have open access resources you can search here too, because some open access resources are legitimate. Just because they're open access doesn't mean they're not, but sometimes they can also be predatory, so we can search that. Just like our Curious channel I believe is open access. So you can download these checklists, you can use them online, there's links to a directory, if I can find it here, of open access journals. Here we go. So again, if we're looking at something that's open access, but we're not sure if it's legitimate or predatory or vanity press, you can click on, these are all hyperlinks, so I can actually search. And you can see there's over 80 languages, 132 countries, over almost 13,000 journals. That are included as they're legitimate journals. They just happen to be open access, but sometimes you're not sure if you haven't heard of something like that before, or the title might not sound familiar. And they actually have other links to things you can check here. Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association. These are all legitimate resources to find or to search that journal, just that if you want to make sure it's legitimate before you submit it. They've got different ones for Latin American scientific. African journals online is one that you can check for legitimacy. Just because a journal's from out of Africa doesn't mean that it's not legitimate, but this is a way you can actually check that. These submit buttons don't actually work. I'm not sure why, because I was looking at this, I was like, oh, so you can like check all these boxes and submit, but if you click on that, it just gives you a big submit button. I'm not sure why they do that. Maybe they haven't fleshed that out. But this is another way that you can know this is a good resource for checking is up here under resources. This initiative is supported by Biomed Central. Let me see if I can find, or maybe it's the about here. I'll go back to the resources. But these are organizations that support or help fund this. So that Committee on Publication Ethics helps support this. Everybody's heard of Biomed Central. Biomed Central also helps support this. That's not listed there, but this is a legitimate tool for determining legitimacy of journals that you want to use. But if I go back to resources, they've got sections on metrics. So everybody's heard of impact factor, I'm sure. Elsevier uses something called SciImago journal rank, which is just a metric that Elsevier uses for Clinical Key and Science Direct. But they'll actually talk about metrics here, how they're used, journal level metrics, alternative metrics. One of the points they make here, which was actually kind of a surprise to me, was that sometimes things can sneak through and have some kind of metric, an impact factor, even if it's not totally, if it's still questionable. But you can actually use some of the links here to search those metrics and see, again, just another way to check. And the other one I wanted to show you was it has a section on peer review. Where is it? Here we go, peer review. So one of the things is a lot of you who have written articles before probably already are familiar with, but it's actually, there's this committee again on publication ethics. You want to be sure that the journal clearly defines the guidelines that they're using for their peer review process, just like our Lucom Research journal on the Curious platform has peer review. So that's basically what I wanted to show today. I can send these links out to you. But again, Beals list, really cool. The original guy, Jeffrey Beals, stopped messing with it like in 2015 or 2017, but it's been picked up again and it's being updated. The original list has been left intact, so updates are listed separately, but this has been updated as late as 2021, which is pretty good. And of course, they've got standalone journals and publishers, and you can search that. But this Think, Check, Submit is a more current. As far as I know, this has been updated maybe within a couple months. And there's copyright and licensing information more about predatory publishing if you're not exactly sure about the difference between that and like a vanity press. But that's what I wanted to show you. I'll put links. I'll put this recording up on the LibGuide, and I have a list. I have a link to Beal's list on the LibGuide, but I'm probably going to add a link to this Think, Check, Submit too, as a resource for authors that are considering submitting manuscripts for publication.
Yeah,
I'd appreciate a link. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is so helpful. I got something from a publisher the other day for a chapter, and I was like, I've never heard of this publisher. I don't know who these people are, and I didn't. So this would be awesome.
Yeah, so you can search. Yeah, you can search for it here, whether or not they're legitimate.
Yeah, and we're always talking as faculty with the journals. You know how do we know? Because we get solicited all the time for a journal to submit your stuff to. So again, I think this is really good for us to have. There's something about that I was going to say. Oh, so it was interesting since we don't have a statistician. I found one at another university for my project and for our study. And we were having this conversation yesterday about open access journals. And it's interesting because the person who's helping me is the chair of the mathematics department. And he was saying, I really think there's been a shift. And I really think if you can find an open access journal that's legit, that the more you'll have way more readership than some of our standard places that we submit. And I thought about that, and I thought, as long as it's legit, maybe we need to kind of shift our thinking with some of these open access journals.
There's some great open access journals. And there's actually been some instances recently in library land we know about. You all are probably familiar with Elsevier. They make Clinical Key, Science Direct, and all these things. UCLA was one of their biggest customers, and the price for these services from Elsevier and other vendors are getting so outrageous that some universities are actually transitioning to more open access resources. And one of their biggest customers, UCLA, dropped all of their Elsevier products, which is a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of business that Elsevier lost. So open access is not, it's not illegitimate just because it's open access. I mean, there's some great open access journals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will send these links out. And
great topic.
Absolutely.
Great topic. Well, that was great. That's helpful.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ron.
Absolutely, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.